Awesome. Okay, so thank you guys all so much. Lots of representation from across Wisconsin. Okay, so perfect. As we get started, Dan and I wanted to take a moment to reintroduce ourselves and share a few quick housekeeping items. Also share our gratitude for the many people and groups involved in making these events happen. We know the names that we casually mentioned throughout the events can be a little confusing, so we wanted to quickly clarify between the different organizations that you'll hear us talking about kind of like throughout each sessions. So the Generator is a startup accelerator that operates in Madison, Milwaukee, and Minneapolis, and they provide the technology and back-end support for us to continue making our Lean Into Allyship events possible. So we are ever grateful for them and their technology abilities that they share with us. Nehemiah Center for Urban Development, Urban Leadership Development is a nonprofit founded by Dr. G, and Justified Anger is an initiative within the Nehemiah organization that we are so grateful to get to work with in elevating these Lean Into Allyship events. And Dan will shortly share more about Nehemiah and Justified Anger, and you can get even further introduced on your own at www.nehemiah.org. Dan and I are, simply put, two would-be allies supporting a Black-led organization to actively be a part of the change. We are growing and learning and unlearning right alongside all of you. So as you've likely heard us advocate in the past, we do ask that in being here tonight, you would strongly consider donating to Nehemiah tonight, as we cannot and do not expect them to support these events and educate us for free. And I believe that we will have some information in the chat about how to do that, and we can certainly cover that at the end as well. We also encourage you to use your company's donation match if they have that program to really maximize your dollar. If you've joined Lean Into Allyship previously, you know that our conversations are rich in content and often supplemented with some excellent supporting content real time via the chat that we talked about. So thanks to, again, our supporting team behind the scenes, but rest assured that we will always send a follow-up email, including all of these resources, the recording of this event, and a link to where you can view all of our previous events on Justified Anger's YouTube page. And as an additional pro tip, if this is your first event, you will likely hear a wealth of terms that you're not yet familiar with. This is okay. This is an opportunity to build your anti-racist vocabulary. And we really encourage you to write down anything that you hear that you're unsure of, what it means or what it pertains to, or, what all exists within it, and do your homework to become familiar after the event, because as we know, ally is a verb. So tonight, we have an excellent agenda to dig into together, and the event flow will include 40 minutes of dialogue and discussion with Dr. G. Like we say, an ally, being an ally is a verb, and it's critical that you speak up, but we know it can be daunting to know what to say, and even more intimidating to ask questions to help and as you learn and unlearn and build your toolkit. But our intention behind LIA events is really to empower would-be allies like myself and Dan by creating safe and actions-driven spaces to grow together. We really want you to have the opportunity to help drive the discussion. So again, just please do join us in, adding to the conversation and sharing your questions in the Q&A as we go along. So from there, we'll have a chance to learn about current volunteer involvement and educational opportunities through Nehemiah from Rebecca Compton-Allen, who is the Director of Mobilization. And we will wrap things up with a preview of our next event, and by introducing a new feature for this year, which is your monthly Ally in Action Challenge to help you deepen your commitment to educate, donate, and affiliate. So with that, I think that covers kind of all of our introductory bases. Let's dive in. Thanks, Dan.
Awesome. Thanks, Samantha. So I have the privilege and honor of getting to introduce Dr. G. And so before I do that, wanted to just restate what Samantha had said about we want you to drive the discussion tonight. So we have some questions lined up, and I'll kick it off with a question to Dr. G, but don't wait until the end to ask the Q&A. We want to be having that throughout this discussion. And so, but to introduce Dr. G. So we are excited. He's the president, the founder, and the visionary for the Madison-based nonprofit Nehemiah. The vision is to engage the greater Madison community to empower African-American individuals, families, and communities to bring about hope, transformation, and justice. And Nehemiah's work actually focuses on 5 key areas, which is education, economic development, incarceration and reentry, family and community wellness, and leadership and capacity development. And again, we are extremely lucky to have him here with his 35 years of experience in this space. And he's actually an advisor to people across the entire world. And his efforts right now are also focusing on educating, coaching, and mobilizing white allies, which is exactly why he is here tonight. So Dr. G, welcome.
Daniel, I'm really glad to be here. I always look forward to these gatherings. And I just need to say both to you and to Samantha and to Lauren and Patty, for you two and the folks at Generator, it's encouraging to see our white allies wanting to help and be a part of the discussion and wanting to be a part of solutions. And when people note the work that we're doing and they comment on spaces like this in the history class, and I talk about the white allies and the non-Black allies that are aligning themselves with us, my African-American friends are floored because they're living and working in contexts where they can't imagine the type of trust, the level of reciprocity, and the relationships that we're building while working together. So I want you all to know that. And Samantha, you all move way beyond would-be allies. We've been at this for like a year now. And so you all have graduated. I'm not just saying that you all are allies. You have proven it. So take that would-be off of it. Let's save that for some other people.
Awesome. Thanks. Thanks, Dr. G. And so I have a little bit of a preface for the first question. And then I'm going to ask and kind of open it up for wherever you want to take it. Sure. But as we think back to just the recent 2020 presidential election and how that really exposed and illuminated so much of what's already been here, it just exposed that again to it exposed some existing structures or lack thereof. And so when we look at January's inauguration, it had a lot of people really celebrating, having a sense of relief, but wanted to start to think about, and talk as to these would-be allies about the tremendous amount of work we still have to do. And so like we talked about in our last event in December about this polarizing election, many people are quick to think that this was a huge win to move us forward. And that's really why we called this session a fresh start. But wanted to ask you specifically, what are you seeing in your community? Again, we don't want you to speak on behalf of everyone in the Black community, but those in your close network and circle. But then also, how are you and your family feeling? Are you celebrating with what happened with the election?
That is a really great question. I would say, I want to try something new, Dan. I know you and Samantha are getting afraid. Like, what's he about to do? This season 5 of my podcast is really focusing on the concept, now what? And my team is actually working on a video to a poem that I've written. And my sister, who's going to be coming on next time, dared me to read it. So in a way of answering that, may I debut that poem?
You here? Most certainly can, yes.
It's trademark. Try to take this. If you folks try to take this from me, not you guys, but the folks, I'm going to get you. We just didn't have the video ready, but it's called Now What? Because it's reminding people we have not arrived yet. We're seeing great things. Daniel and Samantha, there is a sense of hope, but every time there's been Black progress, there's been some setback. The Civil War, we had Reconstruction, but then the president allowed the protective troops to be removed. And so then you had deconstruction and then the rise of the KKK. Black folks were elected to southern states, and then you had poll taxes, and you had literacy tests and grandfather clauses. Did your grandfather vote? Then you can't vote anymore. And then we had Jim Crow, but then we had the Civil Rights Movement, but then we had the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, JFK, RFK. Then we had the election of President Barack Obama. And Black folks said, okay, if he's not going to be assassinated, there's going to be a huge pushback. Then we get Trump that's elected. So I want to state that, yes, we are hopeful that people are talking about these issues, but historically, for every major stride that Black people have made, there has been a setback. In the turn of the 20th century, in the early 1900s, 2,000, that's 2 with 3 zeros, 2,000 Black people held publicly elected positions. 2,000. We're nowhere near that. We are nowhere near that today. And that was 120 years ago. So let me just read this poem. I'm nervous when I read my stuff, so I'm gonna try not to look at you guys. No, let me stop playing. It's called Now What? Trump's been outvoted, denied, and demoted. Republicans cried foul and the Dems just gloated. Biden wins, world news spins, and Senate gives a pass to insurrectionist sins. VP Harris stuns, scared whites still tote guns, and uncertainty about life is everyone's. And these evil fools ain't done. So now what? They say Black lives matter, still Black blood splatters. Black hope scatters, and America's soul's tattered. White folks are now sadder. We'll do better is the chatter. But corporations now promising us upward ladders. But the lack of follow through made to Black folks is making us matter. Meanwhile, the good old Proud Boys are getting gladder. And vaccinations cause Black consternation. And pharmaceutical companies, they're the ones getting fatter. So now what? Our capital suffered insurrection by those who doubted an official election. On January 6th showed true disaffection. They would have never lived if they had my complexion. And those guilty thugs need a house of correction. And civility needs a resurrection. And I just pray for a national day of genuflection. And what doesn't kill us by guns, it's now killing us by infection. So now what? Now what? Allies, what good is it to see but not have spoken, to have dreamed but yet remain unwoken? I'm a man, not a token. Don't fix me. I'm not the one that's broken. Truth's in your face. We haven't been joking. Now you know the violence that America has been cloaking. Huge knees of injustice on our future they be choking. Non-Blacks, there's no time for sitting and soaking. All the embers of justice Black folks have been stoking. You're trapped as well if you're not provoking. It's time for whites to truly be woken. So now what? Now what? Now what?
Thank you for reading it. That was extremely powerful. And I'm very excited for the video that will be coming out about this as well.
Yeah, I get chills when I see it because it's a provocative message, Daniel and Samantha, just to remind people, let's not coast yet. I am happy that people are talking about things that they've never talked about. I'm sitting in places you all have never sat before. Mm-hmm. I've been invited to be on panels at, multinational companies, world-class companies, places like AmFam. I'm being recruited to teach with Dr. Clark Pujara, groups of judges, commissioners, clerks around the state of Wisconsin who are now saying we don't understand systemic racism and we need to look at the connection between US history and Black history and what's happening constitutionally. It's opening doors to talk to school districts. 1,700 people are now taking our US Black history course. About 550 are taking it synchronistically on Monday nights. Another 1,200 are taking it asynchronistically because they belong to 23 companies, faith communities, and they're watching it on Monday nights, Thursday nights. I'm floored. So I'm seeing things, I'm hearing things that I've never seen or experienced before. But I need people to stay woke because we were all celebrating when the Civil War happened and 1900 rolls around and Black people are building HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, Spelman and Morehouse and Hampton and Meharry. But then there's a pushback. Black people were electing Black people to offices in states like Mississippi. But then like in that opening scene of Selma where the clerk asks Oprah, that character, how many counties are in Alabama? And she said, 72. And he says, name them. That stuff really happened. And so when the strides pushing back, the KKK was not a real force during slavery because slave owners did not want to lose their chattel property. They would have fought you if you tried to destroy their property. But when slaves were no longer your property, but they were your competition because they grew sweet potatoes next to you, You didn't care if they lived or died. And so Blacks started swinging from lynching trees and lynching limbs. Every time we make strides, there's a huge setback. We can't let America's eyes be opened, the world's eyes. I'm having conversations with groups of leaders that I'm being invited to talk to, and they're all in Singapore. They're wanting to know what the hell is happening to Black people in America. Folks in Hong Kong, they're wanting to understand our history. So I would just say, I love the awareness. It's not the first time people saw it. Violence against us on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, at lunch counters. The concern of the cameras was really what was happening to white women and white men on that bridge and at lunch counters. But still, when America saw it, they said, oh, we can't believe it. And their hearts were broken. But we're so fickle that once we've been overwhelmed by such ugliness, and I think when our masks come off and we get shots and it's safer to go back into the world and we get out of this Twilight Zone episode, I'm afraid that we're going to assume that because we're good and our families are good, that the world is good. And so unless we dig in deeply now and say, now what? Like now the real work begins. We have been so hyped up over the preponderance of news and a iteration of illness and death and what's happening to Black people, that when it is not constantly going on, we think that no news is good news. The truth of the matter is these things have been going on for a century. The news has just caught it. And so we just need folks who would be allies to lean in and not think we've arrived, but to ask themselves, their friends, their folks that are trying to be on the right side of this. You have to keep asking people, that's great, this is good, new election, new start, fresh start, but now what? I know that was a mouthful, but I'm teetering on a great sense of hope, but with bated breath, because we are so fickle and so addicted to images and movements and headlines that we almost need another death to make people wake up and stay awake. And that's not right.
Thank you for that. Thank you so much for sharing your incredible art with us. That was really beautiful. We can't wait to see what happens next with it.
Thank you.
I think that your poem touched on truly so much of what we are talking about for the rest of this session. But I think if we're able to dig in, a little deeper, that would be fantastic.
Sure.
We know, right, that the reality is that 75 million Americans did not vote for our now current administration. And we recognize that that is complicated. Not everyone agrees with this outcome. What we do hope that we can agree on is that there isn't a good or bad side, and we have so much work yet to do, like we've talked about, right? And then it is about understanding how white supremacy and racism, has manifested and continues to manifest in our culture. You have spent some time with us in the past sharing very incredible perspective about the risk and the danger of solely aligning systemic racism and white supremacy to any specific group or party line or person. We know, that Biden is not coming in as our white savior. We know that, one person and one change doesn't change everything. But would you share a little more of your perspective around that for those of us that are joining for the first time or just need to be grounded in it again?
Sure. My word of warning to people who are listening is that we cannot take something that is as important as racial disparity and try to align it with our party affiliation. I'll tell people, right, I'll go on record and saying, I voted Republican and Democrat on a national level, on a state level over the years, based upon what was being said, what was going on. And so, and I say that to let people know there is not a good Black loving party. What Black people have taught me over the years when it's just us in the room is don't get yourself all confused and twisted about fighting over party lines, because when it's just them in the room and not us, you know what they call us when we're not there. So let's stop acting like there's a group that loves you more than the others. Let's face it, there are folks that are Dems that are very wealthy, and some of what Trump did helped them financially. So we can't act like everyone on that side of the aisle was against everything that Trump did. And so what I would say is to understand that the responsibility on change, or the responsibility for change, is an incumbent upon us as individuals. One of the things that Black folks will say while Trump was in office was that that was really scary, but he revealed a whole lot of stuff that everybody else said, And so one of the things that we take away is, you know what? At least now we know. Like it's interesting, Samantha, when there was this big push to take down Confederate flags. A lot of Black people were saying, and I might have said this here, don't take down those flags because at least we know which houses to avoid. Now we don't know whose house to trick or treat at. We don't know whose house to go in if we get a flat. You know, at least then you could say, I think I'll walk another 2 miles. But and I get why people want to take it down, but we as Black people know how to live around white symbols of white supremacy. We know what, you know, I was in Florida with a bunch of buddies, a bunch of, colleagues. We're just hanging out for a couple of days. Every summer we get together just to do life together. And I just saw this great big truck with white, what, I'm not going to do the hand signal, but it was on there. We just walked around because if you didn't start anything, you weren't trying to sweet talk one of their women, we were good. So we did some paddle boarding and some swimming and some snorkeling. But what's happening in places like Wisconsin is that the microaggressions that come so innocently, so subtly, that's what's killing us. It's not trucks parked at the beach with a white supremacy hand sign on it that's killing Black people. It's thinking that someone's on your side, that someone's allocating for you, and you find out that they react differently to Black folks or vocal Black folks or folks who have a strong opinion. And so what I would say is, let's stop thinking that the media is going to fix this because they didn't break it. The White House is going to fix it. They didn't break it. Let's begin to realize that unless we are willing to be strategic enough to do our part, to be mobilized as would-be allies, to be a part of the solution, let's just stop thinking that everything is settled. I've got to be real honest here because it's just truth. I wished Wisconsin Democratic leaders pursued the Black community the way Republican leaders do. I wish they did. I think the assumption is Republicans are evil. There's no way Black people are going to vote for them. So we're good. We don't have to go see the Black people. We're good with the Black. We think like Black people. We get Black people. We go to Juneteenth. We wave on the stage. We don't even have discussions. The fact that Wisconsin did what it did in the election because Black people were at the polls, it was because Black people got Black people at the polls. It was not because white Democratic leaders got in our community and pushed Black people to vote. The assumption was, we know you good Black people want Trump gone because he's a racist. Like, there's a lot of racists in elected positions. I'm just saying, you can't hide behind your lapel pin and your colors. If you're about it, be about it. But don't be silent. Don't ignore our communities and then act like we're going to have a kumbaya meeting because the cameras are on. Black people are dying in the streets. Screw that. We need to say, now what? And stop acting like we're all good now, because we're not, but we can be.
Wow, yes, absolutely. Thank you, Dr. G.
Yeah.
That ties in referencing microaggressions and the not so understated, things that happen here in Wisconsin and beyond. We do have a question here in our chat about Ayana says, I have a question best explained by using an example. So as a white ally, I have so many questions on how to process and what to think about the events that happened at the Sun Prairie School District. And perhaps not everyone on the call is aware of that scenario and what went down. She says there was not only the events to think about and process, but also the various comments that community members have made. I know that I don't know everything and I don't understand things from others' points of view. Where can I go? Who can I ask to get a better understanding when I have so many questions? I think, conversations like this, are a great way to diversify and, like we say, learn and unlearn. But any comments or insight that you would want to share on that?
Sure. I really appreciate that question and thank you for it. And I hope that you appreciate my response. There's 350,000 people in Dane County, 270 of which live in Madison proper. There are some white people that you can process that with. I think what might be the undertone of that is you want to process it with Black people. Why? If I want to stop sexism, I do not need a woman who has been objectified, catcalled, and harmed by men to come and rehearse to me how egregious it is to be treated the way she's been treated. I need to sit down with men and say, what the hell are we thinking? That's someone's sister, daughter, mother, aunt. We don't need to talk to women to say, okay, is this good? Should we talk about it? So I'm just saying, people, let's just take a breath. Ask your friends, post on social media, ask your coworkers, because there are a lot of people that are thinking that as well. I think what we have not okayed, and I want to just put this out in the atmosphere, in the universe, it is okay for white people to talk to white people about this kind of stuff. Because you know what Black people think? You don't need us. If you see someone being robbed, you need to talk to other victims who have been robbed, who are participating in restorative justice programs to say, was that really wrong? Should you have closed your purse? How should I process this? If you see something that's suspicious looking, you call, you say something. So my thing is, please, that was egregious. Talk to your friends, ask folks, ask people why they're not talking about it. But if that's code for how you're processing it, if you're waiting to process something with Black people for a situation like Sun Prairie, and you know no Black people because you've not worked it, and I'm not being judgmental, I just want to be honest and helpful. You don't know Black people, you haven't processed with Black people, but now you want to talk about this with Black people. That's not the first conversation a Black person wants to have with you if they don't know you. And so ask, why are we silent? And what did that do to white students? There are more white kids in Sun Prairie than Black kids, although sometimes Sun Prairie may not think that, but there are more white kids. What did that do to your white students to hear that? And is that the kind of stuff that the Proud Boys heard, or the guys in Charlottesville, or Dylan Roof, who walked into a church and shot people? At what point do our children become radicalized? We keep saying the internet, like the internet is the new boogeyman. Is it the fact that they're learning stuff in school and no one's saying anything? White parents should be up in arms because somebody's gonna have to deprogram that shit. If we keep putting that on kids, well, it's history, it happened. Okay, fine. But then don't come on CNN saying, I don't know what happened. I don't know why they did it. I don't know why, I didn't see it coming. Yeah, you did. Some of this you saw. You just thought boys would be boys. So I'm just really saying to you in all honesty, find some of your folks to talk with and put it out here, share your email, because others might say, we want to have that conversation too. So have a group and talk about it. But please, let's not think that you have to ask Black people to rehearse trauma in order for you to understand what's wrong with it. How did that harm you? How did that set your child up to be an adult and a professional in a world where she, where he, where they will not be the majority ethnically? How does that help set them up to either be supervised by or supervisors of people of color? Y'all can't just sit back and have them put that kind of stuff on your kids. That's dangerous.
Yes, thank you so much for that. Our next question ties very closely into that, looking back at 2020, the events and the experiences at the beginning of this year as well. A common sentiment by white Americans is this shocked and adamant response that this isn't who we are, this isn't my America, this isn't who we are, when really, historically, in our present day realities, tell us that this is quite factually exactly who we are, right? And I think that you've again covered a lot of that in your last, in your last share out. But if you had anything to respond to that claim specifically, because we just have heard so much of that for the past year.
Sure, I actually respect and appreciate that sentiment, because it is hard to think that this is our reality. I think what happens in pseudo-liberal communities, Samantha, or places like Madison, we'll tell people, well, don't say that. This has been the way it is forever. And on certain days, I've been known to have said that. But the fact is, many of my non-Black friends have grown up thinking this is the home of the brave, the land of the free, and that you can go from rags to riches. It's been a reality. They were fed that. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You can do anything in America. Then all of a sudden, like within a year's time, we have had a crash course in history by just watching COVID, the pandemic, its impact on Black and brown people, all the stuff you all know about. I won't read through the list. It is overwhelming. If we don't create space for white people to say, damn, how did we get here? We're really hurting ourselves. And I understand that. As I've worked in diversity, as I've been engaged in diversity and inclusion work at the university, in my own nonprofit, as a consultant, I have often said for 3 decades, if y'all don't make room for white men to lament and talk about this, because everybody's coming at them, everybody's saying, yeah, and the white men and us, if you don't make room to process that, to own that, to say, how do we become the bad folks? We thought that we were the leaders. We thought this was our God-given right. We thought if we don't make room for people to be able to say, this is America. I just thought that that's what Black people said who didn't want to work hard. I just thought that that's what welfare recipients, like trying to get their brains around what founding fathers had slaves. Now listen, if they just employed people and maybe not paid them as well, maybe they're the equivalent of a slumlord to their employees. But by definition, slavery means the ownership of chattel property, which meant you raped the women the way my great-great-great-grandmother was raped. You sold or threatened to sell their children. You mated them, because if you're a beautiful woman and that's a strong young buck over there, you would make people have sex with folks. Many times masters would sleep with their slaves while the husbands watched. So to me, it's not just you work somebody hard in the cotton fields and that's what it was. No. It was total ownership, mind, body, soul. It was evil. So to figure out that the people who were signing declarations of independence were raping 12-year-old girls, hell yes. That's what was that's what slavery meant. We don't even know that. We just thought, well, they're kind of like indentured servants, and they kind of work themselves to freedom. No. That's why you got to know your history. That's why you got to educate, donate, and affiliate. It was horrible. It was egregious. It was destructive. And the residual effects, epigenetically, economically, still exist today. And so I think we need people to process this. I mean, as a kid, how long did it take us to process that there was no, there might be kids listening. So you know what I mean? In December, like, this is not necessarily true. It took a little while. When I found out, I lied and act like I didn't know because I thought the goodies would stop. And so do I tell? Do I act like I know it? Do I give in, or do I fake up? Listen, folks, white folks, particularly white men in leadership, are going through a true identity crisis because the America that you thought, and listen, I'm patriotic. I love being here. I'm not just trying to act like, when Black people start speaking up about injustice, we get called communists, and now I'm being called a Marxist. We get called these different things because we're challenging stuff and we're teaching critical race theory, because we have the audacity to say, ouch, that hurt. So now we're against America because we just want from America what y'all have been getting forever. The transatlantic slave trade stopped in 1802, but white immigrants coming from Europe in the middle of 1800s could get the Homestead Act. And my family has been here probably since the 1600s. And we didn't get a chance to really vote consistently without being shot until my lifetime in the 1960s. What? And so I think we got to create space. I think when people can acknowledge that, and they acknowledge this is broken, and not turn their faces away and think, how can I be a part of it? That's when I want to start working with people. That's when I want folks like my staff, RCA and Don and Tyler and Eli and Karen and Harry, you, Dan, you, Samantha, and places like this. This is why, after having like 3 Zooms and training companies and doing stuff, well, I'm still energized to come to this space, because I want to create space for white people to say, I didn't know. Honestly, I'm not trying to fake. I didn't know. And non-Black folks, other non-Black folks, to say, I didn't know. I want to create space so folks can say that, because unless you can really say that, I don't know that you can really be of help. And we've got to be able to create space for that level of lament, because the people that are thinking that did not teach their children that that's who we are and what we're doing. That's not what they taught. And now they're wondering, have I really prepared my children for the real world? this is a mess. And moving ahead begins with honesty and reflection.
So just a question. So thank you again for being so real and raw in your answers. That is definitely what we've asked you to do, Dr. G. We did have another question come in back to the voting issue really quick.
Sure.
About, is it fair to say the black vote? So in quotes, is there a white vote? And again, this person suspects that it's not a monolith for either group.
Yes, there's a white vote. I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. But there are people in all groups and have their own self-interest, beliefs, wishes, and hopes. So it's often said that Blacks should vote Democratic, and they wish that they do. But is that too simple?
I think it is too simple. Yes, there is a white vote, and it has just been for white candidates. We think that it has to go along a party line. Until President Obama was was elected, the presidents, the leaders looked like white America. That white vote was to get someone, regardless of what their politics were, it was someone who could somehow relate to you. It's only been called the black vote when it works. We've been voting since the 1860s, but then we were killed for doing it and then lynched for doing it, and our businesses were burned down for doing it. But now that we're turning Georgia, now people like Stacey Abrams, now we're turning Wisconsin, now people are thinking, damn, it's a thing. Now it's called the black vote. And the response to the black vote is white gerrymandering and reducing 180 polling sites in Milwaukee down to like 8. So people are catching COVID to vote. So let's talk about the black vote, but let's also talk about white interference. The Supreme Court, US Supreme Court, weighing in on Wisconsin's election date. Why? Oh, someone was running against the incumbent. We can't lose that seat of that power. So yeah, we could talk about the black vote, but let's talk about the white suppression of the black vote. But because it works, it's now, we watched it, y'all. We watched Stacey Abrams. We watched what happened. And we sat back and just said, I remember there's a sign I saw on the highway that said, it said something like, Black women, thank you. And it was just signed America. It was, I loved it. I wish I'd taken a picture of it. Black women showed up and just did something powerful in this area. So I think we just have to look at what's happening. And then, so now it's fake, and now it's you start calling a rigged election before the election. There's messing with, the postal search, all this different stuff. Open your eyes, people. The administration was understanding that it was under siege. So let's start putting doubt in simple minds to begin to think that this thing can be stolen. When have Black people ever stolen anything from white people in this country that's as important as leadership? Caucasians, please. Y'all can quote me on that one. I never said that before.
We will quote that at the end of the event, just because you told us to now.
It'll be in the tagline for our next section.
Don, can you drop that in hashtag Caucasians, please? And I mean that in the most affectionate way possible.
That is great, Dr. G. We did get somebody else that had a question about.
Sorry.
I think that's what we're going to quote the next one. We're going to have to now.
Okay, I'm back.
Can you please speak to the epigenetics? So this is from Monique. White people often say it was so long ago, just get over it. How can you get over it and it's never been addressed or rectified?
I don't know a whole lot about epigenetics. And Dr. Reese and I presented to a group of biochemists, and I found out that, like, scientifically, this is really a thing, that in these studies, these studies, and again, we start talking about things like this that are somewhat ethereal. We're not sure how scientific it is, but they said they can study the DNA of, say, Jewish people who are descendants of folks who were in the Holocaust, and compared to those who are the descendants of Jewish folks who were not part of the Holocaust, and they could see a difference in their genetic structure. That there's an alteration happens to the firing of our synapses, because our bodies are trying to cope, particularly when something is so unnatural as the kinds of trauma that we've experienced. And so I have to a whole lot about it. But I just say I believe in it. I believe it because the level of rage, the level of anger and disappointment seems to be so grounded in our souls and our bellies that it's got to be more than what a 50-year-old Black man has experienced. I've experienced a lot of good too. I mean, you know, I have a college degree, I have an advanced degree, I own a home, my mom has good health care with dementia. I have good, like there are good things that are happening, but just negative things can trigger it. And they're not even necessarily race related, but the fact that I don't know if that motivated it makes it even more daunting because I can't put that to rest. So I will just say there's growing science that we do carry trauma like that inside us.
Dr. G, I'm wondering, just speaking about family history, if this would be a good time to talk about your upcoming screening of your documentary. Oh, sounds like you're muted.
Sorry, there, yes.
Okay.
So last year we showed the documentary Justified Journey, but and we were going to do a big Black history release, and then COVID hit. Everybody knows what happened in the world. But I will say that Greg Jeske, who heard my story, I talked about meeting my white relatives, and we're all descendants of Reuben Joshua G., a major slave owner in Leake County, Mississippi. The NPR did a story on that journey. Greg followed me to Mississippi and followed me to the graveyard, to churches that my relatives built, land that my family donated to the first school system, and you know, in some of those rural parts of Mississippi. But we wanted to have a showing during Black History Month because we missed it last year, because we thought we were going to have an in-person. This is free. It's this Sunday from 2 to 3:30. We want to try something over the weekend. We want to try something that's early so people can do it. The document, you know, and still have the rest of their day. The documentary is 40 minutes, and then we're going to have panel discussions. But it helps us to understand American history through the lens and the story of one family, the G family. And I think it brings it a little close to home. Some of us think that this is ancient history, or they think it doesn't have any impact now. And so I just think it's helpful to process US history through the lens of someone who's somewhat reputable, depending on, you know, how you see me and my work, somewhat reputable. I get goosebumps every time I watch it. It is so well done. What we now know is that last year it was named the Indian Indie Film Festival's Documentary of the Year. It was just, thank you. It was just accepted into the Winnipeg Film Festival. I have not yet heard how it's faring or how it fared, but it's getting in cool places of film festivals, because I mean, Greg has done documentaries with WKOW for years. He did an award-winning one called Our Wisconsin, and uncovered some of the racial disparities. So he's really gifted at this. It was the first time he's done a documentary where he was not on camera. And so through the interview and just following me down to Mississippi and actually seeing me meet white relatives for the first time on the screen, some of them I had met before, it's a powerful place to begin discussions about the impact of race and race-based slavery and its residual impact on America. And so if you can make it, folks, please be here. My team has already dropped a link to register for it, and our good friends at Generator are hosting that event for us.
It truly is. It's so incredible. It is powerful. It is fabulously done. My family and I will definitely be watching it again. And the Lean Into Allyship community had a chance to watch when it was first released last year. And then we did a follow-up session focused on it. So I believe that should be one of our recorded sessions on our YouTube, on Justified Anger's YouTube page. Maybe we can get the chat to confirm that, but we have had a chance to dig into that deeper with Dr. G following the initial release, and that content was, you know, just as powerful and in-depth. So if you're able to go back and review that as well, but absolutely do not miss this upcoming screening.
Please, please.
And Samantha, for the sake of time, do you want me to ask about the what's next, or do we want to take any more questions from the Q&A?
Let's see. I'm going to be honest, my connection is not great right now. So if we want to do what's next, or if you can see the Q&A quicker, I'm open to whatever you think.
Okay, perfect. So as you're answering this question, Dr. G, I will look back at the Q&A, but again, the whole point of this is the fresh start. And I know with your podcast that we'll talk about to wrap things up as well about what's next. I think everybody's looking for how do we keep this momentum, right? Everyone is talking about it being a movement, not a moment. But what are you seeing and hearing again or what do you feel personally the priorities need to be moving forward? So you've talked about having a space for white individuals to talk about these issues, to address them. What are some other priorities that we should be aware of as we continue through this year and look beyond that?
Sure. I'm going to sound like a broken record when I talk about educating and donating and affiliating. But the piece about affiliating is that you build relationships, you show up at things, and you get connected. Last time we did a lean into allyship, Ms. Jackie Hunt was the speaker, and we gave a call to meet up at our church where gifts were stored to come and help put baskets and things together. I think 5 or 6 people who'd never even heard of Nehemiah showed up. That stuff adds life. It adds years to my life, and it makes us realize we're actually imploring people to begin to talk. And when you're working together on stuff, you talk. We know this is about work. That's why sometimes we know our coworkers better than we know certain family members, because we're with each other 40, 50, 60 hours a week when we used to work, inside the space. And so I would say really affiliate. If you believe in something, you believe in leaning at allyship, justified anger, be on the mailing list. Read the articles, watch the movies that we suggest. We have movie guides and discussion guides, and we have books that are recommended and discussions with them. Get connected, get to know the folks, build relationships. Folks want to just have this discussion and think that you're going to build relationships because you're just talking about race relations. I know Dan and Samantha, because we've done this a number of times, and we talk before the session. And when we used to be able to get together, we've seen a movie together, or we've talked, or we've connected. But I think by educating yourself, you'll begin to figure out things. I would have never thought, Dan, that this is what you and Samantha would do. When you first made that post on Twitter about having seen Just Mercy, I responded, you responded. It prompted me to create an event to go view it with folks. We packed out a theater. We started talking afterwards. I met some of your friends, you met some of my staff. And, I consider you a friend, not just someone who hosts this, but someone who I talk to, and so I don't think people realize that you really build relationships by doing things. And so for me, the next step is just to understand that you just don't want a one-off thing. And if you don't have to wait for us to find Black people. There are now more Black people in Madison and Dane County than at any time in Wisconsin history. So people you work with, if you're a lawyer, there's a Black legal association. If you're a social worker, if you're a teacher, there are Black professional associations within your profession. So take what you're learning and begin to build relationships, not around the race discussion, but around education, law. So build upon what you have in common. But in this time, get to know people. Get to know people. Find ways to do this. Read their books, talk to them, reach out to them on social media, but have discussions with the goal that you want to build relationships and not just build a resume. So for me, the next step is get involved. If it weren't for work, if it weren't for these sessions, I wouldn't know Lauren. I wouldn't have gotten to know, I don't know Patty as well, but you, Samantha, and Daniel, I would not know you all if we were not working on something together. And so we have to let folks know there's a lot to be done, and we're not just standing around chit-chatting, but in the midst of preparing and working, we're having very real discussions about very real issues. And so please, the lack of relationships got us to this place. And so we need relational connections as a healing mechanism for all of this.
And the one thing I would just add to that is when I first started talking with Dr. G, don't let your emotions and your ego and your fragility get in the way. So there was a lot of times when we first started this was not meant to be a series. This was meant to be a one-time event. It was truly an idea. So if you have an idea, run with it and build those relationships and see where it goes. That would be my point of encouragement. Don't think you have to have it perfect from the beginning. Samantha and I on the weekend, had a chat about it, and then we ran it, and then it's built from there. So I would say, don't think you have to have all the answers up front, because then you'll never get started.
Right. And know that your help and your partnership is welcome. You're not intruding in Black space by getting connected, but we've just made the relational aspect of this so difficult, so difficult.
Yeah. We want to make sure to get to the volunteer opportunities through Nehemiah and JA. I just also would like to add on to that fragility and that vulnerability, even including, submitting your questions here in the event tonight, right? Like, we are supposed to get uncomfortable and able, in order to be able to become comfortable down the road in the work that we're doing. So just thank you to everyone that did submit questions. Please know that we log and listen to and think about all of them as we're planning the rest of 2021 sessions. A lot of what was asked is already on our agenda to address and bring in some incredible guest speakers and panelists for the rest of the year. And anything that isn't already underway and covered, we will certainly consider it. And we really appreciate your involvement.
So the one thing really quick before we go into the volunteering, we wanted to put a plug in and an advertisement for the next event. So we're really excited. We're extremely privileged to, on March 23rd, we will have Laleta G coming in celebration of Women's History Month. So she's actually committed her life to defending of Black girlhood, like in particular around carrying the burden of sexual trauma. And she's considered a healer of Black women. And so again, she has 30 years in the field of education and social services. And in talking with Dr. G, he shared that she is one of the most senior individuals in Madison who is involved in this work. She's actually helping the second generation of women. So she's now helping the daughters of the women that she helped 30 years ago. And she's actually a worldwide impact and influencer to Africa, South America, Central America. She's a published author, a preacher, an inspirational speaker. We are really excited and lucky to have her come next month. And again, she has a podcast that we'll be talking about. So just know that we'll be talking about her experiences with all of that, not just being a lifelong resident of Madison, but about the impact she's had on an international healing movement for the Black Woman Heal Day. So we're going to be going into a lot of depth, talking about intersectionality, not just gender, for Women's History Month. And we are extremely excited. And so with that, wanted to kick it back over to you, Samantha, and then we'll wrap up.
Absolutely. So we have RCA here with us. If you want to jump on and share with us some of the volunteer opportunities, we'd love that.
I would love to. Thank you for inviting me to do this. I will try to keep this quick and painless, but I want you to be able to take action tonight. So these are contactless volunteer opportunities. They're things you can do from your home and you can get started tonight. The first pillar is educate, as we talked about before. One thing I will add to this slide is that we are creating a space for white allies by white allies to be processing some of the questions that we saw in the chat. I'll make sure that you can receive information about that if you contact me at volunteer@nehemiah.org. You'll see a few educational opportunities here. The Black Like Me podcast we've talked about tonight, Lean into Allyship, keep coming back. We have an events calendar on our website and more. The second pillar is donate. There are a few different things that we're having drives for right now. I want to draw your attention to keypads for our reentry program. So the whole goal of reentry housing is that you come, you get on your feet, and you leave and you go about your life. And that for us leads to a lot of turnover, which is a good thing. So we're looking to replace our lock and key with keypads. We're looking for meals for our learning pod. And Miss Jackie is doing vision boards for middle school and high school girls. Those are 3 really important drives that I wanted to call your attention to. And the last pillar is affiliate. So like we talked about, we need everyone to get involved. You all have unique skill sets. And those things are things that you can plug in any of our volunteer teams at Nehemiah. We have about 20 different volunteer teams. We can definitely find a place for whatever your passion and your skill set are. So for tonight, you can get on the history waiting list. We shared that link in the chat. you can choose one sustained donation, either monetary or items, that you can give to the community on a monthly basis. And you can sign up for the volunteer bulletin. And hopefully Dawn can help me drop that in there. We'll see, into the chat. Awesome. Yeah, if you go to nehemiah.org, you're going to be able to see volunteer opportunities, and there's a survey there to get you to that as well. So 3 items you can do tonight, right now, just a few minutes.
Amazing. Yes, thank you so much. I'm sure everyone on the call will wrap things up here and go dig into those opportunities. In closing, you guys, here's what we know. We know that allyship is a verb. It is a journey, not a destination, and it is not a title. In its simplest forms, when you are ever in the presence of Dr. G, if you are so lucky, you will continue to hear that allies educate, donate, and affiliate. And with that, just one more additional plug and final reminder to donate tonight to Nehemiah through the ways that were just previously covered, and you can find more information on their site. In elevating our shared commitment, right, as would-be allies, as allies in training, co-conspirators, we would like to introduce a new feature to our Lean into Allyship series this year, and that will be our monthly Ally in Action Challenge. So this intention is really just to take your personal development and commitment to the next level during our time apart. So each month there will be a new challenge. There is no Ally playbook, but we do know that you are hungry and interested in those actionable steps, in addition to the incredible formal opportunities that RCA has just covered with us. Dan and I want to also encourage you to, for this month, for February and March, to spend time expanding your social media feed, right? Diversify your feed. Take time to intentionally introduce Black experiences, Black culture, Black joy, Black love, Black art to your daily scroll. See more than what is in, the bubble potentially immediately around you, and begin to, become familiar with more of the Black experience. That would be our challenge to you for this month. There will be a new challenge for March and April for our next event again, which will be March 23rd. And as always, in closing, Dan and I just have so many sincere thank yous to give to all of you who are here with us tonight. Thank you for joining us for our kickoff of 2021. We're glad to have you back with us. We're so thrilled for the formal alignment and partnership with Justified Anger moving forward, led of course by Dr. G, and your vision and your leadership. Thank you for sharing your time and your energy and your brilliance with us. Sessions and counting. To Rebecca Compton-Allen for sharing our volunteer opportunities, to Don from the team for always being on his game with entering information and resources in the chat, which again will be shared in our follow-up communication email. And absolutely a big thanks to the generator, to Patty and Lauren and Maggie for supplying us with the technology and support yet again to bring you this event. And then an overall thank you to the team, to Rebecca and Don and Eli and Dan and Dr. G for their partnership in planning this event together. Finally, just watch again for that email to come from Justified Anger, which will include links to our previous sessions, the resources shared tonight, volunteer opportunities, and other great content that Justified Anger is working on. And we look forward to seeing you again March 23rd with our special guest, Reverend G. And Dan, do you have anything additional to add before we say goodnight?
Yeah, just one quick thing. So we did forget earlier in the session just to talk about the Black Like Me podcast. So Dr. G mentioned it.
There it is.
Season 5 drops today. And so Dr. G, want to make sure we have time for you to just quickly talk about that, and then also something with Anthony Cooper, and then we will wrap up.
Sure. I'm just excited that we're in our 5th season. Special guests are going to be just weighing in on what they think is next. I have an upcoming interview that will be dropped with AmFam CEO Jack Salzwedel. I'll be talking with Anthony Cooper and State Public Defender Kelly Thompson about the impact of some great things that have taken place in his life. He was just pardoned recently for past crimes. And so many good discussions. And so please subscribe. It's free to do so. There's a link if you want to support it, become one of our patrons. And just help us share, just help us to get the word out. We really want to reach more people. So I'm just glad that season 5 is finally here. and go and consume it and tell others about it and help us reach even more people.
And then do you want to talk about just the Justified Anger podcast as well?
Sure. We just realized that there's so many things that people don't know about formerly incarcerated individuals. And when their stories help to humanize their experiences, we're in a better position to become allies. And so Anthony Cooper, Aaron Hicks, others do an amazing job of telling the constant struggle, because sometimes being connected with the correction system here in Wisconsin particularly is like a death sentence. It's with you for your entire life. And so please join this. This is not a part of Black Like Me. I'm not a host. I don't do anything with this, but it's amazing people telling amazing stories. And if you like podcasts, listen and help share it, because that's why we do this, so that more people will listen and be changed. Awesome. And again, this is the gentleman who was just pardoned by Governor Evers. It's something he'd been wanting to do, have happen for a long, long time. And we don't necessarily think about that because he's a vice president in our organization and doing great things. But now it's like he's got a new lease on life. And so I'm so proud of him and grateful that our governor did the right thing and the pardon board did the right thing in giving this man who's given so many other people a second chance, giving him a chance to do things that he couldn't do before, like get funding for college or maybe run for public office. So kudos to Anthony Cooper and Governor Evers and the pardon board.
And the only last thing I would say about Anthony Cooper, is that we actually had him on 2 different sessions previously. So again, for those of you who this is your first or second time, in the follow-up email, we will send a link where all of the events have been housed, so you can watch that. You can actually hear from Jerome Dillard, Karen Reese, and also Anthony Cooper to talk about mass incarceration, in addition to the other podcasts on Black Like Me in previous seasons. So with that, we look forward to seeing you on March 23rd, and just wanted to thank you again for your time tonight, and we hope you have a good night.
Thanks everyone so much. See you March 23rd.
Thank you all for coming.